Satwat is the Chief Executive of One Parent Families Scotland, which is the leading charity working with single parent families in Scotland, providing expert advice, practical support and campaigning with parents to make their voices heard, to change the systems, policies and attitudes that disadvantage single parent families. Satwat has more than 30 years experience in the voluntary and public sector in Scotland and England, working in the fields of equalities, education, employability, economic development, regeneration and early years and childcare. And since joining OPFS in 2011, she's been a member of several commissions and advisory groups, including the First Minister's National Advisory Council on Women and Girls, or NACAWAGA, as I call it, and the Scottish Government's Social Renewal Advisory Board. She's currently a member of the Just Transition Commission and on the boards of Child Poverty Action Group UK, the Wellbeing Economy Alliance Scotland, Children's Scotland, and is chair of Intercultural Youth Scotland. And the work of Satwat and of One Parent Families Scotland has been, so impressive and so important to everything Engender does on issues of gender equality. So fantastic to have Satwat here with us today. We also are joined by Sarah Cowan from the Scottish Women's Budget Group, who have been firm friends of Engender for many, many years since we were involved in as a voluntary group, and it's been fantastic to see the growth of SWBG over the past few years since Sarah got involved. So Sarah joined the Scottish Women's Budget Group in September 2020 as the organisation enters a new period of development in its 20-year history of becoming formalised. The Scottish Women's Budget Group brings together a wide range of women from across Scotland who have an interest in women's equality and want to achieve better gender equality in our society. Sarah spent her career working on social justice issues, with 13 years spent in various campaigning roles at Oxfam, working on inequality, climate change and humanitarian issues. And prior to that, Sarah worked in Glasgow as an individual advocate for people with physical and mental health difficulties. So fantastic to have you with us, Sarah. Thanks so much for joining us. And then last but by no means least, we have Fiona from Carers Scotland, and obviously care work was talked about during the AGM. As a really key part of obviously all the work we do for feminism, but particularly over the last couple of years of acute crises that we've been seeing. So Fiona is the head of policy and public affairs for Carers Scotland. She's worked for the organisation for 20 years and leads on policy development, parliamentary work, campaigning and communications. And prior to this, Fiona worked in a range of paid and voluntary roles in third and community sectors, including with people with disabilities, with families affected by HIV/AIDS, and in supporting people to become volunteers. Fiona was brought up in a family affected by disability where her mother was the main carer, and that's what guides and prompts a lot of the amazing work that she does. We're in for a treat over the next hour because we've got some wonderful women doing wonderful work to talk to us about what's happening. I'm going to sort of introduce how we're going to be approaching this, because when we said, well, obviously we need to talk about the cost of living crisis, this is the thing that's having the biggest impact on women at the minute. We need to be looking at this and trying to avoid that just becoming basically an hour of us all feeling increasingly depressed and hopeless, because there are people working on these issues, there are solutions to these issues. So what we're going to be focusing on in the first question is that sort of a little bit of hope, maybe. So we all know that this is a highly gendered crisis. It's only going to exacerbate women's inequality in Scotland if the solutions we're fighting for aren't also gendered, and that's what Kat spoke about in the AGM there. So we don't want to spend too much focus on all the ways that that's terrible, but we want to focus on the solutions. So we've asked our speakers to imagine that they're speaking following Engender's AGM in 2024, which, as we said earlier, sort of feels far away, and actually not that far away, but it's in 2 years' time. And we want them to imagine that all the asks that women's organisations, that all of us in this room and across Scotland have been pushing for were actually listened to and acted upon. And so we've asked them to make their introductory remarks from this 2024 utopia where we've won everything, and focus on what things have had the biggest impact on mitigating the impact of the cost of living crisis on women. So with that in mind, I'm going to ask Satwat to go first and sort of present to the 2024 attendees of Engender's AGM. Thanks.
Hello, lovely to see you all in 2024. In 2024, what we've done at OPFS is we've gone back to the women. There was 96% women who responded to our Living Without a Lifeline survey and asked them how things are now. And what we've received is a completely different set of responses to what we had in the survey. So single parents are telling us that they have the money that they need to be able to provide what they want to for their families. And things like having to pay for sponsored events, book fairs, craft fairs, Christmas fairs, all those additional school costs are no longer an issue for them because they've got adequate income. They're telling us that they no longer find it difficult to afford food, electricity, gas, travel and housing. We've developed a social security system in Scotland, which is an effective safety net and recognises the disproportionate role women play in caring and in ensuring that their families have enough to live on. Hey, free childcare hours fit the working hours. There is enough childcare for primary age children in the holiday periods. And it doesn't matter that there's 13-week school holidays and we've only got 5 weeks annual leave, because my employer is really flexible and understands how important it is to get that work-life balance, and recognises that for single parents, for single mothers, the parenting is the most critical part of their role. That's what we've heard over and over again. The work fits in with my parenting responsibilities. I can be there for my child at the start and the end of the day, and I'm not penalised for it. I'm not held back for it, and I don't find myself unable to take part in development and progression as a result of it. The complexity of family lives is recognised in how we design our services and develop our services. It's not a one-size-fits-all anymore. Single parents are 25% of all families with children, and so that's central to the service design that we're seeing. There's no assumptions about there being a second earner. There's no assumptions about there being someone else to take responsibility for childcare. We've recognised that we no longer have a nuclear family model. That's the norm, and we are providing the support as needed for families in the diversity of arrangements that we have. We have social security that allows women to be able to thrive and not just survive. I can pay my rent, I can pay my council tax. I have more than enough money to cover the essentials, including childcare, and more money to be able to enjoy life with my children. It doesn't matter whether I'm in a role that's part-time or full-time, there's equal value given to the hours we work and the quality of the work that we provide. And it's the world of employment that's changed. It's been remarkable what's happened over the past 2 years. We've got the flexibility, and it's not just about working from home. And actually there's an acknowledgement that part-time doesn't mean part-trained or junior level jobs only. We're looking at redesigning work to be able to meet the needs of families and not vice versa. We have affordable housing. There's less profiteering from renting out properties, realistic rents that match the social security available. And actually, one of the things I thought was most important was that what we have is representation. We are in the places that decisions are made, and we've been able to get there because those places have recognised they need to change, and we've worked with them to make that change, which means we're able to sit around those tables and take part in those decisions equally. So that would be 2024, which would be remarkable. Can't wait to get there, because we've been campaigning for many of these things since we started in 1946. Thank you.
Thank you, Satwat. Bring on 2024. I'm gonna pass over now to Fiona and to give us her 2024 update. Thanks.
Thank you. I think mine is slightly less optimistic, but I think by 2024 we've made some steps on the way. Both governments have recognised that, particularly over winter, they need to support carers and disabled people and actively do that, and have a plan to do that every winter. There's been some fundamental change, and that started with a coordinated approach involving all parts of government. As we know, too often social care, caring is seen as a social care issue, sometimes a health issue where we're released to hospital discharge, but it's rarely been seen as everybody's business, and that's changing. We've agreed that we won't just tinker with social security or even the National Care Service. Whilst it's welcome, we're looking at how that actually really delivers, because it won't, unless we do that, it won't fundamentally change the view that caring is primarily women's work, that we're programmed to be caring, that we're the dutiful daughter, the loving wife, the devoted mum. Will always step in no matter how detrimental it is to us, and that view is changing. My utopia in 2024 is quite focused. So for one, the Scottish Government has produced a carer poverty action plan, because we know carer poverty isn't new. Their carers were already twice as likely to be in poverty than non-carers. But nor is carer poverty, nor is this plan confined to income, but about poverty of opportunity, where carers have lost careers, life choices and education. In my utopia, the government is already committed to doing it and has started. And we have the beginnings of the actions, one that emphasises the rights of carers to flourish individually with financial security for themselves and the person they care for. It's a long-term measurable plan, and it's got cross-party support. It's focused on action, not just words, and it's dedicated to change carers' lives. We've agreed that the minimum income will be piloted on carers, giving them a stable income which can be augmented by work or by Scottish Carers Assistance, one that will provide more than just food on the table and heat for the home, but that will change the picture for the 1 in 5 carers who are spending half of their income on heating. The earnings threshold for Scottish Carers Assistance is going to be far higher. In fact, we're thinking about removing it altogether. It's going to be available to older carers. Why should they be excluded? Many have a lifelong caring commitment and have no occupational pension and face poverty from the day they become a carer till the day that ends. We're giving extra payments to people who are caring for more than one person, and we're changing how employment looks. We know that we want to enable carers to be in employment. We don't always see it as a route out of poverty, but not being able to be in work because of inflexible employers is a route into poverty. The Scottish Government is leading and is telling councils and NHS that they need to be leaders too. Every organisation that's funded by the public purse must be carer positive. That means every contract, every supplier must be required to have policies to work with people in their workplace who are carers, to make the challenges of juggling work and care easier. And there's dedicated work with children with disabilities and their families, and read across for young people who are caring, ensuring that their choices are not limited and that our communities are accessible and supportive. And in my 2024, which I'm not going to share my utopia at the risk of being overtly political, but in 2024, we're likely to be having an election. And in those election manifesto, every single party is committed to supporting health and social care and supporting the incomes of carers.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Fiona. I'm sure we can get into elections later in the chat if people are so inclined. So now I'm gonna pass over to Sarah, our final speaker, to talk about what she and the Scottish Women's Budget Group want to be telling us in 2024.
Thanks, Alice. And I'm going to be covering similar themes to Stefan and Fiona, which probably isn't a surprise to anyone. In my thinking of 2024, I've gone for after the draft budget has been announced by the Scottish Government in 2024. So my points are how I'd like the SWBG to be able to react to the budget in 2024. And at times I've gone quite ambitious for what can be achieved in 2 years. But if we can't be ambitious with Engender members, who can be ambitious with? So we've seen with this 2024 budget another record year of social care investment. As part of the economic recovery process for COVID-19 and the cost of living crisis, we're really pleased that Scottish Government has recognised the importance of investing in social care to recover for society and the economy. This means that more people can access free quality services, and with a seeing an ambition set to move care workers' wages up from £12.50, which was committed for 2023, to £15 an hour by 2025. This investment sees crucial recognition and valuing of care, those who receive the support and those who provide it, including the paid care workforce, which is 83% women. This year, we also see funding committed to roll out 50 hours of childcare available to children from 6 months to primary school age. This comes alongside commitments from local authority to provide more flexible care options, which recognise what working and unpaid work life is like for women, and the different responsibilities they have. We see, as others have mentioned, a more caring social security system, which has its foundation on supporting people through the cost of living crisis. Again, the Scottish Government has confirmed increases to Scottish benefits. We're seeing the Scottish Child Payment move up to £35 a week as part of a long-term move towards a minimum income guarantee. And I think fully support Fiona's point about rolling out minimum income guarantee for carers. So I'm just adding that in as what I'd like to be announcing too. And this comes on top, this is where the ambition is going really high. This comes on top of the UK government raising benefits once again, so that we have a core basis for people with universal credit and other benefits that remain from Westminster level. We've seen now an expansion of free public transport to all those in receipt of benefits and all asylum seekers, so that transport is accessible across Scotland, and we're seeing now investment in how to make the bus services more flexible in their timetables. So it's good to see the investment both for the free fares, but also this move to investing in a different way of delivering the services so they meet the needs of those who are not doing necessarily 9-to-5 journeys, but using public transport within the caring roles. And the final thing I'll highlight from this year, 2024's budget, is the rollout of even more home retrofitting. So seeing greater investment, making homes warmer, and reducing the bills that people are having to pay. I think we've seen the Scottish Government over the last 2 years commit this so that it's meeting the needs of those on the lowest incomes first, and reducing energy bills by reducing usage as well. So these are the key areas that I'm really pleased to see in 2024. But alongside this, just a couple of points around the budget process, which has been really good to see in this year as well. This has been the most participatory budget process to date, with greater access to consultation processes for everyone to share their views on what they want to see being spent across Scotland. And the information that's been published this year shows a clear and transparent citizens' budget. So we can now analyse how our public funds are spent this year and beyond.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Sarah. And yeah, a lot in there. For anyone that joined during this, we're talking about 2024. Don't get too excited. Even though I know the conceit we're going for here, when Sarah was like, this was the most participatory budget, I found myself being like, what? No, it wasn't. Oh no, wait, we're looking to the future. That's I hope that gives people a sense of what we're all working towards, where we're heading, but I'm afraid we are going to be sort of rolling back now. We're going to be talking a little bit about where things are now. I really want a sort of sound effect of a sort of soap opera wibble that we're going back in time to the present now. And we are joined by Catherine, but unfortunately tech issues mean she's finding it quite difficult to hear. So I'm just gonna crack on with the chairing. Apologies, people. But everyone that was at the AGM did get to hear from Catherine earlier. So but you're stuck with me. Apologies, panel. But we will get there. So I mean, I was making furious notes in what you were saying there, and I think there were quite a lot of, obviously some commonalities, but also some really interesting things that I maybe didn't expect to come out, and I'm pleased did, which is this idea of so Fiona talked about, you know, support over the winter, but making it every winter, looking at, you know, the fact that people's circumstances might change, but they might also stay the same, and that our current responses don't really understand these things. So we have age cut-offs, or we have or, you know, we have these very brief mitigation attempts, or cost of living supplement and payment, you know, payments that come in, but we don't necessarily have the long-term investment. Sarah mentioned climate change, obviously pretty pressing issue for us all. So and it makes me think that people often point out that, you know, we're talking about a cost of living crisis today, but what is the sort of cut-off that makes something a cost of living crisis? Many women have been living in a cost of living crisis for decades, and we often call these crises or different forms of poverty different things. So we talk about period poverty, we talk about fuel poverty, whereas actually, you know, that they can sometimes, I think, serve to hide the ongoing nature of women's poverty. And I would just be interested if anyone had any reflections on that sort of, that idea that actually this isn't, you know, there's not a set period for what a cost of living crisis is. Anyone can just jump in and unmute, go for it. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. We talk about poverty. We try not to separate it out into different aspects of poverty, because fundamentally what's at the bottom of it all is a lack of money. And I think that's critical for us to maintain a focus on. I think you're right, Alice. What we've seen is something, I mean, this cost of living crisis doesn't have this disproportionate impact on women out of nowhere. It's because it's built on a series of systems that have been discriminatory and disproportionately have impacted women for decades. So what we're seeing is a cumulative impact of austerity. For us, with single parents, single mums in particular, we've seen an increase in a punitive social security system predicated on conditionality, which takes very much a work-first approach at the expense of everything else. Then we had the pandemic, where women disproportionately bore the burden. And now on top of that, we've got the cost of living crisis. So you're right, this isn't anything that we need to be looking at or responding to in segments, but we need to look at it holistically in terms of what the impact of all this has been on women, and then address that in that systematic way, which definitely to me is about systems and the way systems are set up and designed that we need to address. But to turn it on its head and say, actually, the starting point for it is what's the experience of women, and working out from there, as opposed to the way that we currently, or that those who are policy designers or makers currently do it, which is what have we got and how do we tweak it to make it a bit better? You know, that's not giving us any sort of meaningful change. There's not even any incremental improvements for the women that we work with, the single mums, as a result of that approach. All what we get is, for a short time, I might be slightly better off with that, but my worry is that come 3 months' time, I'm going back to where I was, or even further back. So I do think we have to look at how we can look at this in the whole, and the impact of poverty and the lack of money, and what sort of redistributive measures we need to be taking to get to that utopia of 2024.
Thank you. And Fiona, you've got a hand there. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would echo very much what Sarah was saying, but I think, you know, that there's some things that, you know, I don't understand in terms of like winter fuel payments, for example. Why is there no winter fuel payment for disabled adults? There never has been. There's never been anybody wanting to look at that, and it's something that we've very much pushed for. But we know that households with disability are more likely to be in poverty. We know that carers are more likely to be in poverty than non-carers. But the fact is, it almost seems that for too long it seemed like perhaps too big a problem, which is one way of looking at it, too big and too expensive a problem. But some of it's really underpinned by you know, for example, where carers allowance came from, and even the campaigning around carers. I mean, that started in the 60s, and although things have changed to some extent, you know, not a lot has changed from when we were the National Council for Single Women and Their Dependents, and that idea that the financial support for carers is based almost on a bit of pin money, rather than proper income replacement that says what you do is valuable, what you do is important, it's part of our well-being economy, it's one of a very, just like bringing up children, a really, really important part of life, and we want to invest in that. And there's never been that recognition. I think there's more recognition of carers, but there's never really been that recognition that you actually need to fix the fundamentals of it and fix the fundamental problems. We can put sticking plasters over things, you know, cost of living payments, operating carers allowance by a certain amount. But in the reality, when we published our research, when I went through the responses from carers, it's absolutely devastating what they're facing just now. But some of that is not new. It's a bit worse now, but some of it is not new, and I think it's absolutely a bit of it's a disgrace that so little has changed. And you know, I said in my bio that I was brought up in a family affected by disability, and I was only 6 when my dad became ill, and you know, I think of that impact on my mum, that impact on our family, the things that we didn't have, you know, living in poverty simply because my dad had a disability and my mum cared, and how much in that, I don't really want to say how many years, but in those decades, how much really has changed apart from tinkering around the edges. So it's some of that fundamental getting under the bonnet and really changing things.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think that's that idea of the, you know, these ideas being old and actually based on, you know, a completely different world, but also patriarchal ideas and all these things. I mean, we talk about that a lot with abortion, for example. So, you know, that we still see the impact of what was a very misogynistic law in it, you know, in the way we're doing things now. But yeah, that's really interesting to think that. And it goes back to what you were saying, Sat, in your opening remarks about nuclear families, you know, not being the reality and all these sorts of things, and actually how much do we need to completely reevaluate and say, let's make a system for the now, you know. Sarah, were you wanting to come in there?
Just briefly to add to what's already been said. In your question, Alice, you said about the sort of segmentation of poverty into all these different bits. We're doing some research at the moment with the Poverty Alliance, which will be published next week, in fact, so please look out for that. But one thing that's come out in that as well is about the time and the experience women have in terms of like managing poverty and having to go to all these different places to because of the issue that really it's income poverty, as that said. And so the pressure then gets put back to those who are managing in the household and trying to keep things together, and women having to spend a lot of time going from different places, and also working out if there is any other support available, and that sort of management process around poverty as well, which it just seems to be such a kind of people having to spend their time and effort on that adds to the stress and anxiety alongside the poverty they're experiencing.
Yeah, absolutely. And Kat mentioned in the AGM, you know, we've done some work on, you know, the mental health impacts of particularly carers, but also young people, and the sort of, you know, the mental health crisis that is here, but is going to deepen and worsen, and you know, and that is a key part of it. This additional mental load and anxiety, and that you know, and just that sort of organizational aspect that women take on in the overwhelming majority. Sat must put a comment in the chat there about one of the biggest issues that single parents consistently speak about is stigma, and how that affects them and the support they receive. And that's something I was thinking earlier as well when we were talking about, you know, the creation of the welfare state, and it's something we talk a lot about. These are entitlements, and you know, that they're, you know, and moving away from the language of welfare or benefits, which, yeah, and that idea that it is pocket money or it's for the sort of junior partner in a marriage and those vibes, but actually these are entitlements. These are what we say are needed to have the quality of life that we believe everyone, I mean, they're not because they're too low, but you know, that's the principle, is that they're intended to do that. So I've got lots more questions, so don't worry folks, but if anyone does have any, please pop your hand up, pop them in the chat, and we'll either you can come in on the mic to say them, or we can read them out for you. But I wanted to touch on employment, which is something a lot of our panelists mentioned, and I really like the phrase, you know, it's not, employment shouldn't always be seen as a route out of poverty, but barriers to employment are definitely a route into it. And I think that's a really interesting way of looking at it. And particularly, you know, we're talking about crisis over crisis, but poverty of living, the sort of poverty crisis coming straight after COVID is really interesting, because obviously we very quickly switched from conversations about, well, do we need to get back to business as usual in terms of work, you know, or should we look at doing something differently, to saying, look, everyone wants to work at home now because we had the pandemic, to now saying, and this is in government plans of looking at energy costs and things, people are going to be going into the office now because they can't afford to heat their homes. So the sort of constant shift around this is really interesting. So, but looking at, you know, employment that adapts to people rather than people adapting to it, which I think was Satwad's point. Has anyone got any thoughts on what that looks like, but also whose responsibility is it to make this happen? Is it about government? Is it corporate power? Is it businesses changing? Is it the unions and workers? Is it about individual advocacy? Any thoughts on how we redo employment in Scotland? Fiona, thank you. That was a big question, so I'm glad you're in there.
Yeah, I might not deal with all of it. I think, I mean, we know that carers already fall out of work because of the caring responsibilities, or have to reduce their hours. And some of the state of caring research really looked at asking people about their working patterns and what had made a difference to them. And for so many carers, actually the ability to have that flexibility, that ability to be able to work at home, or even to work in a hybrid fashion, was so important to them. For some carers, it wasn't an option because working at home was not an option for that particular role. But there was a significant percentage who said that if that changed, they would not be able to work any longer. And I think I think it needs to be led by government. We have the Carer Positive Award, and there's something around about 500,000 employees in Scotland work for employers covered by that, but we've not been able to make the move for government and the public sector to say that actually when we procure services or support or commission, that actually every other employer right down the supply chain needs to be doing the same. And needs to be supporting people in their workplace, so I think government needs to lead this. They need to be the ones that say, as well as say, for example, promoting the living wage, the real living wage, that actually every employer needs to be carer positive as well, because we know for employers we can evidence the financial gain for them of in recruitment and retention. And because the peak age of caring is between 45 and 54, that's your most experienced employees, and to lose them and have to then invest in recruiting in a very challenging time at the moment, but then also training someone to that level is a significant one, and actually costs employers millions upon millions upon millions of pounds every single year. So it's about changing that narrative, but government does need to lead it.
Thank you. Satwat, do you want to come in there?
Yep, thank you. Very briefly, I think I agree absolutely with Fiona that it needs to be government-led, and it can't rely on corporate social responsibility or any of those other things to try to make this type of big systems change that we're looking at here. What we have at the moment is probably a lot of carrots and support the Scottish Government can provide, but none of the levers to be able to make the changes to legislation. But I do think there's more that can be done in Scotland. We have a commitment to fair work that feels like it's very much a paper commitment at the moment. I'm not really beginning to see the impacts of any of that for the women that we work with. We have a business pledge, which I don't know what happens once businesses sign up to it, what sort of monitoring there is, what sort of assessment there is of progress being made, what support's being offered, and actually what measures can be put in place to actually get them to move a bit faster on some of this, or very much faster than they are at the moment. We have lots of warm words, but we're not seeing the action and the follow through that we need here in Scotland. And I think that's going to be critical, that we need to become a lot more challenging and, challenging with evidence of where things aren't working, as well as providing the options for how they could work. Because that's certainly something that comes through very strongly from single parents. I think hybrid working would be a great way if it became integrated into how we work and becomes the norm. But however, for many of the parents we work with, it's not a choice they have, given the types of jobs they're doing and the sectors that they're working in. So there's definitely a class element to some of this as well we need to be thinking about in how we support women. Like Marks and Spencer's, for example, were a great employer at one point for single parents, where they would provide 16-hour contracts, they would provide the training and the support required, and you'd have your fixed hours. And it really supported single mums into work. Right? They then changed their contract, so you had your 16 hours fixed, but had to be available for another 8 over and above that anytime during store opening hours. The rates of single parents working there dropped significantly. And that's quite a small change, to be able to point out to someone to say, actually, look at the detrimental impact that's had on your retention of staff. So there's definitely work we can be doing with employers, but I think the big systems change and the government-led approach is what we need. And I think we need to change the way we look at the whole progression journey into work. I mean, we haven't touched it on employability, but employability in Scotland works really badly for women and works terribly for single parents. And it's something that really needs a good redesign. So we're moving away from a work-first approach to a human capital approach, which recognises the value of caring and the validity of caring, recognises volunteering, and allows for an aspirational approach to work and progression. I mean, what we find, sorry, it's my last point, I looked at some Fair Start Scotland statistics, and the levels of retention in work for single parents who've gone through Fair Start Scotland are frightening after 3 months and 6 months. Hardly any manage to retain work. And so it's a case of being able to also identify where the issues are in the system and look at the solutions to be able to address those specifics as well.
Fantastic, thank you. And we've had a couple of questions in the chat that, Sarah, if you want to talk about employment and bring in some of these. So we've had Lucy's asked about the panel's views on a citizens or universal basic income, and I will come back to the other panelists on this as well. But Sarah, if you want to cover that in your answer here. And also I'm just giving you 2 bonus questions, but just on what's that, just they're about employability. And thinking about how you mentioned retrofitting and the sort of green economy, and we know that care is a low carbon economy. We know that there are huge links here between women's employment and this. But how is the just transition agenda that we all know needs to happen? How does that is that being gendered in a way that's appropriate? I'm assuming no. But any thoughts on that as well would be really helpful from you, Sarah. And then I'll come back to the other panelists on CBI. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Just very briefly on the job, the jobs and part of it, building on what Safa was saying about the Fair Work agenda, and that's quite a paper exercise. We know that, so I'll take an example on that. We know that in social care, it's been this Fair Work Convention has said that fair work is not being delivered in social care. Yet the proportion of public money that's used within social care should be part of levering in and making fair work happen, basically, in terms of how commissioning and how public funds are used in these kind of areas, so that fair work moves from being this paper exercise to being, it has to be delivered, especially where public money is spent. That's where the government can also put its money where its mouth is. In terms of the citizens' income question, I think that depends on how anything like that is designed. So it needs to be designed with equality at its heart, and designed in a way that is looking at how it can work for women's equality. And in that way, it could be a lever to support. I think in Scotland, we're looking much more at the minimum income guarantee, but it's similar principles really, in that it's dependent on the design, and for equality to be designed into it, and not a design to be developed and then go, oh, and how will it work for women? Maybe we can do split payments. But that has to be built in from the very start, because I still don't think, even though technically split payments for universal credit should be available in Scotland, I still don't think that's actually worked out how to deliver it. And on the question around just transition, I'll put a link in the chat, because the UK Women's Budget Group launched a report this week that's very worth looking at, based on a couple of years worth of work they've been doing about a feminist Green New Deal. And I think there's a lot we can take from that in terms of what we should be looking at and trying to call for in Scotland for a feminist just transition. The Just Transition Commission, in their first report, there was some very good reference to, and knowing who some of the members are, it's maybe not surprising, but good reference to the needs to invest in social infrastructure as part of the just transition. So, but then you look at, well, it was on Twitter, like pictures from the Scottish Government talking about green jobs and green employability, and it's all hard hats and wind turbines. So we need to look at widening and expanding what people think of in terms of green jobs. So very much that care is included in there, and that investment in these areas is part of us transitioning to low carbon moves. So I'll put the link in for the UK Women's Budget Group piece, because it's worth taking a bit of time to look at that when you have it.
Thank you. We've also had a direct question for Fiona about the transport costs, and time to and from work must be a particular factor from carers, and that links in with this flexible working discussion. So, you know, the ability to work from home might save you sort of 2 hours a week, just in sort of commuting time. And I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that, or about if there are any of those incremental changes like free transport for carers and things that help with any of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly something that we have continued to speak to government about, around extending free transport to carers, partly cost, but also to look at demand responsive transport, so that it's about enabling that to fit in with carers' lives. Most local areas have things like taxi cards, which provide reduced costs for taxis, and for carers who have limited time, and I expect actually, you know, that cuts across parents as well, but that option to be able to use transport in a different way, and for that to be funded and supported. And that's particularly also around areas that don't have buses or trains, and many of us have had the experience of attempting to get a bus recently, and it's been challenging, to say the least. And if you've got caring responsibilities on top of that, it can be the final straw in being able to maintain employment. So I think we really need to look at it very closely, in terms of, it's not just about about buses and trains, but about looking at what is it the carers need in terms of supporting them across their lives.
Amazing, thanks. And we will be sending an email out afterwards with all of these links in as well. So yes, if you're like me and have a million tabs open, don't worry. So we've got sort of 10 minutes left, and they've got a couple of chunky questions, so I'm going to sort of merge them a little bit. But I want to talk about like empowerment and participation. And, you know, we had citizens' budget mentioned. We've talked about that in a little bit, but I think particularly the cost of living crisis even more so than other crises we've seen recently, it feels even more prone to women being shut out of the discourse. So, you know, we know women aren't normally seen to be able to talk about the economy because that's a man's thing, but this also intertwines with, you know, the invasion of Ukraine and foreign policy, again, a very male sphere, energy policy, a very male sphere, and you know, all these things that are seen as things that women can't or shouldn't or don't want to be involved in these conversations. And then in addition to that, we have the, you know, that Fiona referenced, we have constitutional crises left, right, and centre. You know, we had Brexit, we've got absolute, you know, chaos, whatever your party political views are at Westminster, you know, unprecedented changeover of leadership. We've had talk of a second independence referendum for Scotland in the next couple of years. So I suppose, how do we get in those seats at the table? Is there you know, these constitutional crises or things that are seen as male and these big issues, and then we're trying to get in there? How do we challenge this idea that this is just sort of something that happens to us rather than something we actually are empowered to get involved in? I'm going to wait for someone to unmute and come in. Fiona, there you go, being brave. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm probably going to be quite simplistic about this. That was a very big question. I think you know, a number of us are involved in a campaign around Scotland Cares, around the national performance framework, including care and caring, and I think that some of that work in terms of we need to have the measurement, and that's a key driver of growth and our economic health and of a well-being economy. And I think about that way of changing the narrative and enabling women to become involved in that way. I mean, I think we can see from Brexit, for example, not listening to particularly the women, the challenges that is caused in terms of the social care workforce, for example. We've got huge gaps in it, and the income thresholds for enabling people to come and live and work in Scotland or across the UK are far too low. And that's partly around saying that care is low value work, and it's not high skilled, and actually it's highly skilled. But it's not recognised as such, and that has really helped contribute to the challenges that carers are facing, and carers basically being left to sink or swim at the moment, because recruitment challenges are so clear, and I think that talking around constitutional issues, I think we've had really unpleasant narratives. And I think when we look at systems that set arbitrary incomes levels and values jobs in different ways, it leaves our country wanting, and we're wanting the right economy, the right public services and the right support, and I think that as we move forward, it's around changing that narrative that actually, you know, if we want a well-being economy, we need to create it. It won't happen by accident, and part of that is because women aren't at the table, and I think changing the narrative and the national performance framework is one step, one way of doing that. I'm sure others have other ideas, but I think it's going to be critical in trying to change things.
Fantastic, thank you. Satwat.
Thank you. I'm just going to talk about, go back to one of the quotes we had in the report, single parent representation. We need to be in the places that decisions are made, but we can't unless those places change. And I think, you know, when we speak to single parents about that, a lot of that is very small practical changes. When things take place, where they take place, how they take place, what support is provided, which means that you're able to go along without having to have all that worry about, oh, well, is my mate going to make it over in time to look after my kids whilst I go to this? You know, so we need to actually shift how we organise things. And I think key to that are two things. And I'm going to come back to one of the questions really that was asked earlier. If we had a minimum income guarantee, which provided for a decent standard of living, and we had universal basic services, which is the other thing we've been looking at, then we'd be putting in place the supports universally that would enable more of the women we work with to consider how they get to those places where they can be involved in the decisions and the discussions. Then we'd have to look at how we change the environment and the dynamic within those places to make it more equal and equitable and easier. Because so many places where debates happen become toxic, you know, and adversarial. So it's having to also shift that dynamic in order to make it a place where we want to be, as opposed to a place that we're feeling a bit apprehensive about going into. And I think just touching on something Fiona said, within that we have to take an intersectional approach. You know, yes, I'm a single mum, but I've also got a child with a disability, or I'm a single mum who's an asylum seeker. All those things need to be taken into consideration in terms of how we create spaces where we feel able to share our voices.
Amazing, thank you. Oh, there's a comment in the chat there from Lucy Ross about pushing for legal equal political representation. Yeah, so alongside, and that might help with changing those places to make them work for us. Sarah, over to you.
So I completely agree that it's like having a space, it's up to government, local authority to create those spaces so that people have the better opportunity to participate and have clear information about how to participate. I'll just speak on the budget since that's our focus. At the moment, the information that's available on that is very dense and not accessible, and that's very off-putting. So that's why I included in my calls for 2024 much clearer information and better ways to participate. But if a little plug for some work we're doing, if people are looking to understand more about the budget and how the budget can be used for feminist goals, then in the new year we will be putting on gender budgeting training. And we also have gender budgeting training for community groups. So if you're part of a women's group and as a group you'd like to put on training to look at how you can then tackle issues with local authority budgets and how they're being spent, and we can run sessions like that as well. So please get in touch if it's something you would like to do more on.
Amazing, and yeah, can't recommend that training enough. But it's very worthwhile doing. I'm going to close us off now, and I want to reflect on the fact that we have a virtual room full of amazing people, and that we all believe in the power of women being a little bit gallus of getting stuff done and just getting in there. So I want us to all take an action point away, and that action point is that if we bump into Nicola Sturgeon or John Swinney or the chair of a local authority or anyone you know with power, I want you to think about the thing you're going to say. It could be, oh my God, can I get a selfie? So imagine you have two things you might be able to say, but feel free to pop it in the chat or raise your hand or unmute and shout it out. And I'd like to know, it can be something that the speakers have said, but you've sort of got a chance to say, I've got 2 seconds, please do this thing. What's it going to be? And I'm going to ask our speakers to come to that thing. That may be something they've already said, it might be something brand new to close us off, but I want us all to go away feeling like we've got our words in our head. So when we bump into someone that has the power to affect this change, which we will do, we can say it. I think if anyone's going to be brave and put their hand up. Yeah, you didn't think you were going to be put on the spot, did you?
I don't mind going first if that helps.
That way, yeah, please go for it.
I think my main thing would be stop accepting the recommendations from the reports that we are putting together and the evidence we're gathering if you don't intend to actually implement them. You know, let's sit down and have a meaningful conversation about what is achievable and what needs prioritised.
Nice, bit of honesty from our politicians. I think a lot of people would agree with that.
Yeah, I think I would be saying prioritise carers right now, stop waiting, and say calling them heroes and how much you value them, actually do something. And just by happenstance, I'm due to bump into John Swinney in a meeting on Tuesday, so I'll be saying that too.
Amazing. We've got statutory respite for carers in the chat. We've got misogyny as a hate crime, and we've got lots of applause for what other folk are saying. Sarah, have you got a?
I'll go with bringing equality analysis to the heart of the decisions that are being made in this cost of living crisis response, and not fitting them on afterwards. So really like changing the way decisions are made so that the issues we've been talking about today are at the heart of that process.
Amazing, thank you. So we've got there. So if you haven't thought of your own yet, do ponder that on the day. But if not, you've got 3 to pick for there. Don't say you're going to do something without unless you're actually going to do it. Don't just clap for carers. Please actually prioritise them in policy and funding. And please make sure that you are not just thinking about women or equality in general as an afterthought. Think about that with every spending decision and every decision you make. So we will leave it there with your homework for everyone to, if you just want to hang around where you think people might be, or you might even be going to meetings with them as Fiona is. So yeah, please keep those things and keep those, those visions of 2024. And I hope we can be joining people at the Agenda AGM 2024 and at least doing having some positive wins on some of these things. Thank you so much to our speakers. It's been really amazing to hear the sort of depth of things you're working on. From the main message I got was that we need a revolution, which I'm down with, but also the sort of day-to-day fights that everyone is continuing with, which is making a real difference. So as I say, we'll send out an email with all of the links and a recording of this when it's ready. But I'll just leave it to say, have a wonderful rest of weekend, everyone. Go around and fight the feminist fight. Thanks all so much.